This is Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com with my daily wrestling news update and combat sports news. For that matter, Stephanie McMahon, who is the chief brand officer of the WWE, sold $1,029,963.90 worth of WWE stock today. Her husband, another WWE executive, Triple H, sold over $1 million in stock earlier this week, and other executives in the company have been unloading stock, which definitely puts up some red flags to a lot of people. Dave Meltzer expects that Vince McMahon is probably going to react in some way regarding WWE's eroding viewership right now, which is the worst in history for Raw. They have very little star power. The atmosphere of the shows that don't have any crowd is terrible. Compare that to AEW. They're not dying like WWE. They're staying pretty steady. They're not growing, but they're staying more steady. Only 1.5 million people watched Raw this week. So compare that to TNA in 2010. There was about 1.5 million people watching Impact in 2010. And look where Impact is now. They don't even have ratings anymore. And the company's all but disappeared. In other news, the Boston mayor has announced that they're not going to have any large gatherings in the city, likely until after September 7th. So that means it's highly unlikely Summerslam will take place as scheduled in Boston with a crowd. Another couple of notes from the Wrestling Observer Radio that I listened to today. They feel that Vince doing business with Saudi Arabia might have something to do with the public getting turned off of the WWE product in recent years, not just the poor quality of the show itself, but the bad taste that it leaves in people's mouths, that Vince is in a business partnership with a place like Saudi Arabia. Chris Jericho is also one of the main reasons why AEW is holding strong. And one of the main reasons probably why AEW has beaten NXT 25 times now in the ratings war, and NXT's only won 5 times. I mean, AEW's actually won in the ratings every time but one, but in viewership only 25 times. So the ratings are a little bit different than the viewership, but NXT really doesn't have the star power. I'm actually surprised myself that they don't bring in more star power to NXT. Dana White has also stated that there's going to be no punishment on the UFC's behalf to Jon Jones for his recent DUI arrest. I conducted 2 extended interviews today, one with Daniel Puder and one with Brian Blair. I'm going to post a clip from the Brian Blair interview in a minute where he goes into great detail of his work with the UWF, which was the subject of this week's Dark Side of the Ring documentary. Brian Blair was booker of that company, and he also helped Herb Abrams get funding. Of course, Abrams was the eccentric drug addict owner of the UWF. And for Daniel Puder, I definitely think he got the short end of the stick. He was popular enough to win Tough Enough. He was voted by the fans the winner of the $1 million Tough Enough. But because he had that incident with Kurt Angle, who had a lot of power in WWE in those days, I believe Angle held a grudge on him. And they never actually had a feud in WWE because Angle held a grudge that Puder basically could have snapped his arm if he wanted to, when Angle tried to basically bully Pewter in the ring. So I do believe that WWE should have at least had one match between Pewter and Angle and have Pewter put Angle over, if nothing else. If Angle didn't want to make a new star, obviously they could have feuded them and had something. But to invest, let's see, they released Pewter after a year, so he only got $250,000 out of the $1 million that he won allegedly, but the $1 million was spaced over 4 years. So they released him after 1 year. So he only got $250,000 of that about. But that's still $250,000 of WWE money, and they did absolutely nothing with him. So that's a huge waste, and that just shows you how backstage politics can screw people over in WWE. Kurt Angle was definitely politicking there. And for those of you, by the way, Pewter does talk about this beat down at the 2005 Royal Rumble to me, where Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and I think Hardcore Holly gave him a few chops. Now, for everyone saying that that's a beatdown, I've done MMA sparring, I've done kickboxing sparring, I've done boxing sparring. I can assure you, taking chops is absolutely nothing compared to getting smacked in the head during sparring like Pewter is used to. He's an 8-0 MMA fighter. And you're talking about chops in the dungeon. It wouldn't be uncommon when I was training down in the dungeon to take up to 60 chops in one practice, and we weren't getting paid anything for it. So I think for the people that think, oh, they beat up Daniel Pewter, I don't think so. And I actually agree with Pewter. He could have beat any of those three guys. We saw that Hardcore Holly wasn't tough in the Brawl for All. He wasn't a good real fighter. Eddie Guerrero, I guess he was a street fighter, but he wasn't as well trained in MMA as Pewter. And Chris Benoit is a chicken shit, child murdering coward that I've never heard of being in a real fight. I'll get into some of your questions. JD says WWE stock is a huge scam. Chris Ruth says hi. Anthony Shabbat, how am I? I'm doing all right. Chris Ruth, September is a long wait for live events in Boston. Yeah, it's bad out there. I think this is going to go on for a while. Jordan Dixon says Jericho's great. Yeah, AEW was lucky to land him. He's really the big star of AEW. Jay Rhodey, not good when people are forced to sit at home and watch TV and they can't even get ratings. Bring back Russo for some better numbers. I think with Russo, it's even though Russo was there when they were getting their highest ratings of all time, I think the highest rating of all time was like an 8.2 or 8.3, which they will very likely never get again. I don't think they're going to exactly bounce back after this slump because, as you said, people are stuck watching TV because of this lockdown. There's no sports. UFC is just starting up, but there's no other sports to watch. They'll have even less viewers once empty arena sports start because the product is boring. And as Meltzer pointed out, the atmosphere sucks and they aren't being very creative. Why do they still do in-ring promos and in-ring contract signing if there's no crowd? That's just poor creative. AJRX, Takeshi69 broke the Instagram record with 2 million live viewers. What is that rating? I don't know if Instagram has Nielsen ratings or not. The ratings are the percentage of, like, for instance, the percentage of 18 to 49 aged males that watch the show, which is the most important demographic because they buy the most. For 2 million live viewers, that's more than Raw had this week. They only had about 1.5. That's more than SmackDown had last week. So Takeshi69 did get more viewers than Raw or SmackDown. McGregor, did I see the Killer Cross entrance in NXT? Yes, I actually did watch Killer Cross's NXT match yesterday on YouTube because I interviewed Killer Cross and I actually hung out with him for probably 3 or 4 hours at the PCW Ultra show a few months ago, which was one of the last events he did before he started with WWE. I did an interview with him there that's on this channel, and I wish him luck. I do like Killer Cross. I think he's talented. I think he has a good look, and I think he's legitimate. So he has my stamp of approval. It's unfortunate watching that match again that it's in front of no crowd, because it really takes away from the atmosphere that could have had in front of the crowd. But I do like him, and I wish him all the best. Kevin Ader says, billionaires selling $1 million or $2 million doesn't shock me. I don't know how much Vince is actually worth now. Before this whole XFL bankruptcy and everyone selling WWE stocks, he was worth close to $2 billion. But I've heard people say Vince is worth closer to $1 billion right now. I don't know if that's true or not. If someone wants to tell me Vince's current net worth, email me, greatnorthwrestling@gmail.com. Uncle Rory says WWE sale is definitely happening. This is unusual activity. So many executives selling hundreds of thousands to millions of stock. That's unusual for sure. Daniel Puder had heat with Kurt Angle and Hugh Morris. Yes, he did. But I would say it was more of a Kurt Angle issue. Kurt Angle had power back then, and WWE dropped the ball not having them feud, not having at least one match. Because as I said, as Puder told me, he was popular enough that out of all those tough enough guys, including The Miz, it was the fans that picked the winner of that tough enough, and he was chosen the winner. So they just dropped the ball with him. And he had a lot of interesting stuff to say, like Bruce Pritchard alleging on his podcast that he had no creative ideas. He brought up the situation of when they tried to do vignettes with him. They had him do stupid stuff, and they tried to make him out as a heel, even though he'd just been selected by the fans as the winner. So why would you make a guy that was put over by the fans a heel? It makes absolutely no sense. Tommy LeBlanc, how do I think Herb Abrams died? Well, he died of a cocaine overdose in the back of a police car. Brian Blair goes into great detail on it. Pretty much as by 10 o'clock p.m., the clip of Brian Blair talking about it will be online. And if you go to patreon.com/thehannibaltv, my full interviews are up there ad-free with Brian Blair, Daniel Puder, Mark Marrow, the comedian I interviewed this week. I'm working on more Baby Doll I'm interviewing next week. I'm trying to keep going despite this lockdown. It looks like the border is going to be closed for a while, too. Looks like they're not opening the Canada-U.S. border for a while. Did Bob Holly and Benoit slap the shit out of him? They chopped him a few times. That's it. Like as I said, I've had sparring matches where I've literally sat down on a bench after, and the room has been spinning from taking hits to the head. And Puder is an MMA fighter, so boom, boom, taking a few chops. Seriously, is that beating a guy up? I don't think so. A couple more questions. Oh, thank you for the $9.99. I think that's pounds tip. Roy Heat Vuhara or Vuhara. Rohit. You're a legend, bro. You don't hold back on much. All the best from England. Thank you. I was actually supposed to be in England in November, but unfortunately the event they were bringing me in to cover got canceled. Thoughts on WWE women's wrestler Liv Morgan? Haven't seen her yet. Kurt Powell 3-2-1. Shouldn't be sparring too that hard. There's different levels of sparring, and if you don't do hard sparring before fights, you can become overwhelmed in fights. I did have 3 kickboxing exhibitions. I won them all. I have a lot to learn to become a good stand-up fighter, but at least I'm undefeated in stand-up fighting. I probably will have a few more fights in my lifetime before I'm over the hill. Al Hirschen, what I interviewed, Johnny Rods, who was apparently the drug dealer to everyone in WWE back in the old days, according to Tony Atlas. Yes, I would. H20, my thoughts on this weekend's UFC. I'm interested in the Francis Ngannou heavyweight fight. I've been watching the UFC embeddeds. Gagey, or I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. I'll probably watch that one, but I'm not that interested in the lighter weight fights. Russ Montablo says there's no psychology. Vince went entertainment and stopped developing episodic angles. When the writers took over, that was the nail in the coffin. They don't listen to fans. I agree that their stupid issue, and you guys said it, you just said this, Russ. They want to be entertainment. They don't want to be wrestling. Guy like me, I'm a wrestling fan. Russ is probably a wrestling fan. We want to see wrestling. We don't want to see like bad acting, shitty comedy. Remember like when Macho Man went like that to Hulk Hogan and like shook his hand? The shivers you would get from that. There's nothing like that in wrestling anymore. Donald DJ, do I like Buff Bagwell? I'm neutral towards him. Rich Rodeo, I remember your Puerto Rico run. Was that your best year in wrestling? No. Hell no. Great North Wrestling was more profitable to me, where I was always the star of Great North Wrestling, than Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, I had fun. As far as being featured on TV every week and being given a push there as a former IWA Intercontinental Champion, 2-time WWC Puerto Rico Tag Team Champion, I was given a push. It was my best run up to that point, but I've done more in Great North Wrestling as a wrestler and booker to make money and so forth. And that's still paying off through the videos that I have on this channel now that I get residuals off of because it's my channel. I produce those events. Favorite workout song to get me hyped? Oh, God, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. Oh, God. I don't even know if I could answer that one. Better Austin and McMahon, Rohit tipped me another £9.99. He has a question. How much is down to luck to make wrestling? Because if one of 2 guys, Vince and Triple H, don't like you for whatever reason, how is it down to hard work and not luck? That's a good point. You could be very lucky and they'll just want to push you. It is luck. Luck has a lot to do with it. Luck and being a good politician, sucking up to the right people, being nice to the right people will help. But definitely you could be the best wrestler in the world and Vince and Triple H aren't going to like you, and you're either going to be a jobber or released. That's a very good point there. And thanks again for the 2 tips, Rohit. Sorry if I can't pronounce your name right. But luck has a lot to do with it. The Ultimate Warrior was lucky. He had the look that they wanted at the right time. He got the big push. There's been other examples of that. Brock Lesnar was a lot of luck too. They really liked him. And then he also happened to have the talent. There's been other guys that haven't had as much talent and have got the push, and it hasn't worked out too well. So that's going to be it for me tonight. I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to post that Brian Blair video. Did I watch Jinder Mahal's Return John Residence? No. I haven't talked to Jinder Mahal for so long. I'm almost beyond caring about him. I do like him, but like we've gone our separate paths. When he first got in, I was still really close with him. His last indie match was for Great North Wrestling, so I was really interested. But it's been like 10 years since I've talked to him, so I'm not as interested in watching him anymore. So yeah, make sure, by the way, Instagram at the Hannibal TV, we are posting videos on that. We do have a podcast where I post my full shoot interviews in download audio form. The link is in the description. We are on Twitter at the Hannibal TV. And thanks again for the tips to my UK friend, Rohit. Really appreciate it. Stay tuned for that Brian Blair UWF clip. It's very interesting.